Or good to go, Chair.
Great, thank you. Okay, I call the August 10th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting to order at 6 o'clock in the evening. Vineyard, will you take roll?
Bradley. Chair Ron Heberlein.
Here.
Vice Chair Jennifer Willard. Cameron Mesbaugh.
Here.
Love Gallagher. Here. Brianne Tusinski. Here. Aaron Woods.
Here.
Andrew Carr.
Here.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And will staff lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands,
To the republic which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible,
God,
indivisible,
with liberty and
with
justice.
liberty and
and justice for all.
for all.
Thank you. And now, citizens' input. This is the time that citizens have the opportunity to address the Planning Commission regarding any item that is not already scheduled for a formal public hearing tonight. Therefore, if any member of the audience, either here in City Hall or here via Zoom, would like to speak about any work session item or any other matter of concern, please raise your hand or send a message to the recorder using the Zoom chat function so that we may hear from you now. And Mr. Pauly, do we have anybody at City Hall or via Zoom?
Not that are here with to present, so that are not here to present. So nobody for citizen input at this point.
Okay. All right. Moving on to the administrative matters. First and only item is the consideration of the July 13th, 2022 Planning Commission minutes.
And as noted, those are actually not in the packet, so those will need to be considered next month.
Okay, well, we will move that to next month then. Thank you for that reminder. All right, we can move on to the first work session of the night. Looks like Transit Master Plan is first on the list.
Yes, and this is an important project to update the SMARTS master plan and concerning the great service it provides to the city. So the city's project manager, I'd like to introduce Kelsey Lewis, the grants and program manager at SMART, and appreciate her and her team being here tonight and sharing this information as this project gets kicked off. I think the commission will find this project very interesting. And so over to you, Kelsey, if you want to introduce your team and go from there. Thanks.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm, again, Kelsey Lewis, SMART Grants and Programs Manager. I'm here to talk with you about the Transit Master Plan update. We also have present here two of our consultants who will introduce themselves when they get up here. And also we have on Zoom our Transit Director, Dwight Brashear, and our Transit Operations Manager, Eric Loomis, if there are any questions that come up for them. So I just wanted to let you know that those folks are here. And at this point, I'm really just going to hand it over to our consultants to introduce this project to you. And next, I will bring up Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelsey. Hi, my name is Michelle Poirot. I'm a principal with a firm called Jarrett Walker and Associates. And we're a small firm based in Portland, Oregon, and also DC, Washington, DC, and we specialize in transit network planning. And I'm going to be joined in just a minute by Brenda Martin, who's just off camera, and she's with a firm called Enviro Issues, and they are leading the public involvement for your transit master plan update. So we're going to give you this little presentation. It's an honor to be speaking with you again. I actually recognize this room, and I know a little bit about Wilsonville because I was involved in your transit master plan back in 2016. So if any of you were on the commission at that time or involved in transportation planning back then, it's possible that we spoke at that time. And so some of what is in Wilsonville in terms of transportation is familiar to me, and of course a lot of things have changed, so some of it is unfamiliar and new. I want to talk through our agenda for today, and how do I advance or share? Do I go share screen? Okay, thank you. There we go. Oh, thank you. All right. How is my audio? Can you hear me? Yes, nods. Thank you.
That's great. Yep.
So our agenda for today, introducing our team, which we've done half of, or a third of, counting all three of us. I'll just briefly explain what the Transit Master Plan is, not really for you commissioners, but for anybody listening in. We're going to go over a general project schedule for the year, and then Brenda is going to speak in more detail about public engagement, and especially the survey and the stakeholder workshop. And this is the part of our presentation where we're then going to be interested in your opinions and your feedback on the public engagement. And then we have time for questions and comments from you. So our team, I already mentioned my own name, Michelle Poirot. I'm also joined by three other people with Jarrett Walker and Associates, Alvaro Caviedes, Evan Landman, and Shreya Jain. So they're kind of helping me behind the scenes. Leading public engagement, we have Brenda Martin with Enviro Issues, and then her colleague, Sarah Omlar. And we also have engineers from Parametrics who are kind of waiting in the wings. They're going to come on and help with transit operations advice, capital planning, fleet planning, once we have a draft of a transit plan, transit network and service plan for you, then they'll come in and add in those elements. So what is the TMP update and what is happening here? The TMP update is a 5-year horizon plan for transit. And in particular, it speaks to how transit serves the goals for your city, how transit relates to your comprehensive plan, and how transit supports your planned growth. Your last TMP update was completed in 2017. That's the one that I was involved in 2016 and 2017. But a lot has changed since 2017. Happily, there has been an increase in operating funding for transit in Oregon since 2017, so that provides some great opportunities. You do have some potential new service areas with the growth in the city. It's possible that your goals and priorities for transit have changed since then. And of course now, since the pandemic, we may be seeing changes in the way that people move, the frequency which they move, times of day that are most important to serve with transit. And you may think of other things that have changed since 2017 in addition to that we should be aware of. Our timeline for this project is this. We began in spring with an existing conditions report. It is nearly finished. I believe you got just an excerpt of it in your packet, but the full report will be available soon. We're kicking off community engagement pretty soon, and that's something Brenda can talk about in just a moment. Then we're going to go on and take the input we got from the public and develop some potential service enhancements. So, how can you improve your routes? Maybe they go different places, maybe they run at different times, at different frequencies. And then we will do some work planning the operational and capital needs that would support those service enhancements. We'll then go back out to the community for a second phase of engagement to ask their opinion on those draft service and capital ideas. And then once we have that public input, then we'll finalize a transit master plan. And that finalized transit master plan will be in spring, summer 2023. So with that, I would like to hand it over to my colleague Brenda Martin and allow her to speak to you more about public engagement.
Hello, Commissioners. I had to take my mask off because my glasses keep fogging up. I'm sure you're all used to that. My name is Brenda Martin. I am a public involvement specialist at Enviro Issues, and I'm going to focus kind of on where we are now, which is our first phase of community engagement. So here you see a quick overview of our schedule for that first phase of engagement. It's going to be going from now until October, and we will be doing a few key tools during this engagement phase, which I will be going into in other slides. But a quick overview is that we will be doing website updates throughout this first phase on the Let's Talk Wilsonville platform. We're really following along with the way that other projects have been sharing information on that website to make sure that it's consistent for residents and visitors of Wilsonville who want to learn more about the project. We are making presentations to yourselves and council in the next month to present the Transit Master Plan and to talk about what it is and how your input will be needed. Probably the biggest chunk of our outreach is going to be around a public survey that will be kicking off actually at the end of this week and will be up for a month. And that survey will talk a little bit more about how we plan to administrate it. And then in September, we'll be doing a stakeholder workshop with a smaller group of stakeholders to ask for their feedback. And we will be ending all of that outreach in October with a summary that will then be used for the next phase to create those service enhancement networks. And then, of course, coming back to all of you to present our findings. So that first tool we'll be using is our public survey. We are kicking it off this Friday, and we will be administering it online, so it will be available on the Let's Talk Wilsonville SMART page for the TMP. We are also going to be attending summer events to let the public know about the TMP update. SMART staff has already been attending farmers markets and community events throughout the city, and we'll be keeping that up until the end of the survey on September 12th. We're also planning on doing intercept surveys on board buses to try and get riders to take our survey. And the survey is really asking, it's pretty short, it's about 10 to 15 minutes. I think it's 10 questions. And we're asking riders and non-riders alike to share their current travel patterns, how they hope to see SMART improve their service, and how to best meet their needs and the needs of others within the city of Wilsonville, both visitors and residents. And then we want to get a better understanding of what locations or services are important for them that SMART serve. And finally, we also want to understand the regional destinations and priorities around Wilsonville that people are trying to reach. We have a lot of this information from data over the last couple years, but we understand with the pandemic, a lot of that has changed. So we are excited to hear a little bit more about how people are traveling and where they're going. At the beginning of September, we'll be doing an intensive half-day workshop for stakeholders. This is where we really are going to try to focus in on getting stakeholders that have more of a vested interest in the Transit Master Plan. Maybe they represent agency, key organization, or community groups that we know tend to be more transit dependent or might have trouble connecting to transit currently. This is going to be focused really on getting these stakeholders to help us consider some of the trade-offs between local versus regional service, and again, those priorities of where SMART could serve or better serve the residents and visitors of Wilsonville. The workshop will have some interactive exercises where we can help people kind of develop their own routes and take some of those considerations of distance versus frequency, which is a very common consideration in transit service. We will be doing some live polling to get some kind of immediate feedback from stakeholders, doing a brief presentation about the TMP, and hopefully have some of those more in-depth conversations regarding the trade-offs that we need to consider as we develop this plan. So This is where the interaction part of our presentation comes in. We have a list that we've started to put together that has a list of stakeholders we are hoping to start inviting in the next 2 weeks to our stakeholder workshop. We would love to hear from all of you if there's any groups that you think we should reach out to that would really fit and get a lot from attending a workshop like the one I just described. So far, we're thinking about inviting other jurisdictional partners, either from other departments at Wilsonville or neighboring cities. We certainly wanted to invite the Wilsonville Community Sharing, which is our, might have users and participants who are transit dependent and need to travel to their food banks. The Chamber of Commerce as a representative of businesses in the area. Those who live or represent apartment complexes, since they tend to have a lot of density and maybe higher use of transit. Youth representatives, who we know are always going to be more likely to use transit as they are exploring their own freedom and boundaries throughout the city. Faith leadership and leaders regarding churches and places of worship that might be easily accessible through transit, our community seniors and assisted living facilities, knowing that seniors and honored citizens tend to really rely on transit as they grow older. So I'd love to open the floor for questions or any suggestions for other groups you think we could invite. Thank you very much for your time.
This is Aaron Woods. I have one suggestion, and that's homeowner association, HOAs. A number of people living, in homes are using public transportation. So I think you should add HOAs to this list.
Thank you so much, Commissioner.
Commissioner Carr.
I would say minority groups as well.
May I ask if there are any groups you know of who could help us?
Yeah, I don't know what our writer mix is, if we've ever taken a poll of ethnicity by that, but I know of Hispanic individuals and Indian individuals that are pretty strong writers of that, but I don't know where those organizations are located. So.
Thank you. Yes, I should have certainly mentioned that as we reach out to these organizations, we will likely want to add something to the script that we use about seeing if we could get some diverse representation from each of these stakeholders, but it is certainly a time we want to spend to make sure we have a diverse.
I mean, you could try our diversity commission.
Love it. Okay.
To get ideas about those.
Commissioner Gallagher.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, having gone through this, I'm wondering if reaching out to, we have 2 or 3 physical therapy clinics in the area, as well as Providence. I'm just wondering, people who are, injured for a 6 to 9 month period can't get themselves around. I'm wondering if that isn't also a population that's underserved, that don't even realize that they have an option when they can't drive themselves.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Commissioner Kaczynski, Commissioner Mesbah, any thoughts?
Yes, I'll go. I'd like to see a little bit more focus on a youth representative. I know there's a lot of younger generations, older high school students, college students that not only want to test some of their limits of freedom, but also are looking to reduce their carbon footprint and not drive as much. So I would definitely like to see that represented a little bit more.
Thank you, Commissioner. Absolutely.
The list is a stakeholder list, which typically means those who use the transit system. I think those who don't use may come out of the survey, and you may want to have a follow-up conversation with them to see why that is and whether there are potential users in that group that we don't know about, or that there are impediments in the use that we haven't zeroed in on that would add to the ridership. But those I would call stakeholders. I think that is part of your survey conversation.
Correct, Commissioner. Yes, we do have a few questions asking anyone who takes a survey how often they have taken SMART over the last year, and those who said they haven't been taking it or have never taken it, we ask them why their reasons are, and they're allowed to choose as many as apply. So I think that will be really interesting to see, and hopefully could help us do some follow-up. Obviously, I completely understand that they are not maybe the stakeholders we think of, but usually they are the people we are trying to convince to use transit.
Mr. Woods, looks like you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just had one additional question on the survey. Is that survey bilingual?
Yes, we translated it into Spanish. So we translated it into Spanish, and I think there's also a potential on Google to translate the page, but we can look into that as well.
Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, I echo Commissioner Szynski's comments around youth representatives. I saw the bullet here that said youth representative and took note of that in terms of, you know, my belief, they're the future of transit, they're the future of the city. I want to make sure that we're really listening to those people that will be using the system for the longest period of time. So that one's important to me. In general, similar to Commissioner Mesbah's comments, you know, I would be able to better respond to what the list of stakeholders should be if I knew what the goal was that we were trying to achieve. If the goal was that we're trying to achieve a X amount increase in ridership, then that is a different set of stakeholders in my mind. If we're trying to maintain the existing ridership base, then that is a different set of stakeholders. Then we would be wanting to look at just those people that are currently riding. And so for me, that's an important aspect of this is what are we trying to achieve? And by knowing that, it's a lot easier to develop a list of stakeholders.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, I am wondering if we know I feel like in the existing summary we had a list of the goals of the Transit Master Plan that I'm not going to be able to list off the top of my head.
I can't list the goals off the top of my head either, but I will say that this stakeholder workshop is going to be about questions of priority and policy and for the future plan. So we're interested in stakeholders not just as people who might themselves want to ride the bus, but also people whose opinions should be considered about how Wilsonville grows, how transit changes in Wilsonville, and what's most important as you develop the transit system over the next 5 years. So it's people with lots of different perspectives on your city and the life of your city and the growth of your city, as well as people who are interested in transit.
Okay, well, then given that, yeah, I think including homeowners in this as well, I think would be a good addition because that helps round out the overall community. You know, we've got a very specific portion of the community listed with these stakeholders, and so I think homeowners would be a good addition to have to that.
Yeah, great, okay. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments from the commission on the stakeholder list?
We will also take questions about just the TMP or other aspects of the process.
All right. I'm not seeing any hands go up.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time, and if you do think of anything or have other thoughts, I am sure you can all contact Kelsey, and she can share that with us. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. looks like you're next up on the list with Frog Pond East and South.
Certainly. Give me a moment to get over to the other computer and get set up. So give me just a moment. And thank you for indulging in the awkward silence for a few minutes well, maybe it was 30 seconds. It seemed longer than that. But anyway, so we're here for another work session. We're getting towards the end here. Relatively speaking, we still have a number left, but really we're at a point where there's some key things we need to talk about and get guidance from the commission as we continue to move forward with refining this and getting it ready for adoption later this year. So, and with me tonight, helping present will be, we're a little ahead of time, so they haven't quite joined yet, but that's okay. They'll be joining before their piece comes up. Will be Joe Dills, as well as Soumya Kinney from Walker Macy, talking about the public realm element specifically. But before we get to the public realm discussion, wanted to spend some time back with the residential policies for housing variety, building upon some conversations we've had over the last number of months as we continue to move forward in developing what those look like. Following that, we'll shift gears into discussing the public realm, which is a very important part of the master plan, to really identify how the neighborhood's going to look and feel and how those public spaces are going to come together. Finally, we'll highlight outreach efforts that have been happening and are planned, and including surveys and different events. So the housing variety policy. So let's step back. And you had, first of all, stepping back to what you had in your packet, in terms of the affordable housing analysis, a lot of this housing discussion continues to be built upon that. But back in February, after we went through the affordable housing analysis and that discussion back in January, we came to a number of design concepts to guide development of the master plan, and some specific ones related to housing that continue to play into what we're talking about and guide what we're doing. It's having housing variety throughout, to not only having a variety of housing, but make sure it's mixed up and integrated throughout each sub-district and or block. So it's really, there's a granular mix. Also, along with that, the affordable housing, the targets that are discussed in the affordable housing analysis that is also integrated into the master plan. And also this discussion of sub-districts, having that a variety of housing in each sub-district, kind of related to the housing variety throughout, but that we're using sub-districts as a geography to look at housing variety. So last time I shared this slide talking about scale of variety. So we're talking about variety on a large scale across the whole master plan area, where we have the three different design types, type 1, type 2, type 3 that we've discussed. But as you zoom into each of that, whether the brown, the goldenrod, or the lighter yellow, it's not just uniform. There's variety within there, more granular. And approach, this is again a screenshot from the Wilsonville Village Master Plan, which I was going to put in that slide, but I just realized, Commissioner Carr, that did not make it in here, but I will touch on Wilsonville a bit here. Wilsonville, we mapped each of the housing types in a pretty granular sense, very detailed block by block, different types, and then the master developer was at the table, so they gave input. Rather than putting it exactly where it is, as you zoom in, kind of defining the mix we want, but as development occurs over time and development approvals, then it'll be more defined of exactly location-wise within an area where those different unit types are. So Wilsonville, we ended up, the master plan had 13 different housing types. We ended up with 11. The two that didn't occur were pretty specific things in the village center that were like adaptation of existing buildings that ended up not being feasible to keep. But you do see much more mix in the village center, where you have blocks where you have apartments, attached townhouses, condos, as well as detached homes, all within a block. As you move out to the edges, it is a bit more where you still have some areas that have townhouses as well as detached homes on the same block, but generally it's the same product on each block. So that's, so balancing how much mix is in these different areas will be important, and I'll touch a bit more on that here in a minute as we discuss the options. So last work session, we talked about the approach and ended up with two components that were the recommendation that came from the commission as well as supported by council when we took it and discussed it with them. So the first one, again, harkens back to the affordable housing analysis, as well as some other things, to require a minimum amount of certain target housing types. And the second component is to then cap the amount of any single housing type that can be built within a given area in order to help ensure variety. So then as we move into further refining and developing those two components, there's some key questions to answer, and that's really what we want to discuss with the commission tonight. The two key questions when it comes to the target housing types, or that first component, is what are the target housing types first of all, and then how much do we require of those target housing types? So as discussed in the staff report, staff's had some initial ideas about what this might look like and what criteria could be used. Which really goes back to the affordable housing analysis. Now, I want to be clear, kind of going back to that Wilsonville picture, that this is defining the mix of uses. This isn't defining any specific price point. This is defining the variety, kind of zoning, flexible zoning, rather than defining that, okay, you can't charge more than this for this product, but really looking at the mix that gives the best opportunity to serve different market segments. And so in that sense, to require certain types that need to be really subsidized to be feasible doesn't make sense in that sense, because even if you require, let's say, apartments or certain types like that, or cottages, you can't require them to be affordable to less than 80% through this zoning method. So that's really where staff looks at, because one of the needs for affordability is that 80 to 120% of area median income. And in the affordable housing analysis, it lays out certain product types that are likely to be able to serve that market segment. And so targeting those housing types shown in the affordable housing analysis, such as townhouses and the smallest single family, and as well as like triplexes, quadplexes, some duplexes that can meet that. Other ideas that have been kicked around and maybe under consideration are ADUs and cottages. There's specifically in Metro's conditions of approval, explore encouraging ADUs. So certainly encouraging ADUs or getting more ADUs is something that we can consider, because not only can they help with affordability, but meet market segments demographic-wise that aren't otherwise served by larger homes. There's also discussion both in this project as well as the previous middle housing project about accessible living options, particularly smaller, accessible, single floor options. So that's something to consider. I would mention that in those will probably be, we kind of have more information initially of how to do the those townhouse type, those 80 to 120% units. But you know, how much accessible living options, if we want to do that, would take some more analysis by the team. So the other thought before I open it up to the commission's comments on this is, as we look at this, what to require versus incentivize. So as we talked about last month, a number of these things likely wouldn't be built by the market through incentive, or there's not enough tools to really incentivize, or wouldn't likely. So it really does, a requirement makes more sense. But we also want to consider that maybe some other things such as ADUs we may be able to work some incentives there as well to get more of those. So that is the incentive approach is still on the table as well. I wanted to make that clear. So if maybe we can go with the commission and get comments on, I think we're on the right track, kind of pursuing this 80 to 120%, and as well as other options or other thoughts about what type of housing should we target, and how we might determine what is the right amount of those targets to require. Are those questions clear enough? Any clarification I can offer there?
Well, Mr. Polly, I would say we'll go around and see if anybody needs some clarification.
Okay.
All right, Commissioner Carr, why don't you start us off on this one?
Sure. So I think last time we talked about, how we can take different housing products and put them within the same types, right? So you could have you can put townhouses within all three of the different type designations.
Correct.
Is that a correct statement?
That is a correct statement.
Okay, all right. So based on the fact that we're shooting for that 80 to 120 MFI, I think we're going to see townhouses and condos and smaller detached single families. Then we'll see the really large houses. I think to get the mixture across all of Frog Pond, knowing that Frog Pond West has been built out with the larger houses, I think we're going to see more of those. And I mean, I can go through the different types and the mins and the maxes that I kind of came up with, if that's what you're looking for, or do you want to go to that level at this time?
Go ahead and offer any comments you have right now.
Yeah, so I was looking at like type 1, I thought 4-unit townhouses, 3-unit townhouses, multi-story condos, and detached single families, and it was like 20% mins and 30% maxes. I don't want to be overwhelming any one of those types. So that kind of gives us a good spread across there. Type 2, I had 3-unit townhouses at 30% min, 50% max, and then detached single family, 30 min, 50 max. So that way, at least we have at least kind of a 50-50 split. And then type 3, again, 4-unit townhouses, 2-unit townhouses, and detached single family. And I thought the townhouses would make up 50%, and the detached single family would make up 50%.
And would you mind emailing me to those after the fact to make sure I have it all down accurately?
I will do that. And I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Carr. Way to set the bar high.
I was just going to say I'm leaving.
Yeah, well, great thing, Ms. Gallagher. You were next on my list, so.
I reserve comment. I am totally shut down after that.
All right, let's go with Commissioner Trzynski.
My question is it possible for us, to require a minimum of whatever, and then, sorry, my dog is barking right now, and then incentivize over that? So if we do, if we require 20% of houses have ADUs, let's say, but if a builder wants to go to 50%, is that possible for us to incentivize beyond that initial percentage?
Yeah, that'd be possible to. Yeah, we could come up with a zoning scheme that wouldn't be too complicated, as I imagine it, that could offer a minimum as well as incentivize additional. I think that'd be doable.
I agree with what the dog just said.
Sorry, Bruno, stop.
No, it's okay.
His name's Bruno.
Hi, guys.
And that's all I have for now. But actually, yeah, if Commissioner Carr could or forwards that to you and you want to pass that around so we can all take a look at it, that might be helpful.
All right, Commissioner Misbah.
I read the material and I don't have a good feel for what a balanced approach would be at this time. I think we definitely want to do everything possible to have a standard minimum and then incentivize. That's a great idea. That works with other design preferences. But what the target mix should be, I really don't have a clear view of that at this point.
And you don't have to offer numbers, but if there's certain even types that you think should be included in those targets that we should be targeting.
But see, that's the problem. That's the problem I'm having. I want to make sure that we don't paint ourselves in a corner that's impossible to meet by not only incentives, but, the market situation and this, that, and the other thing. Thus far, we've been working on the premise that we are keeping the flexibility, but also keeping the minimum stuff so that we don't have these cracks where you can fall through and miss the opportunities for achieving the kind of affordability we're looking for and the mix we're looking for. We are not getting to where we need to be, I guess, more specific, and I'm not there yet.
That's fair.
Okay.
And do you have ideas of type of information that may help you?
Well, the market analysis is very helpful. That changes. I'm struggling with coming up with a design and policy set that allows the flexibility for staff and the decision makers at the time approval is being sought to find the best mix and the most doable mix at the time, and also not throw the baby out with the bathwater. And that's where I'm trying to get to, and I'm not getting there. What information is policy language for the most part, I think. So as you come up with proposals for how to frame this, that's when I think I'll be able to give you a little bit better feedback on where we are.
Okay.
Is that making any sense to you, Dan?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think I'll address one thing you said about, the mix and flexibility. And I mean, we can explore, is there a way to, update the regulated mix in a couple years after we finish the housing needs analysis and have a new production strategy? That's something that could be explored as well.
That could be explored. I was hoping not to have to do that. I was hoping to have a language that is aspirational and tells the decision makers at the time, whenever these decisions are going to be made, what the idea is, what the target vision is, and allow them to be able to hone that to what the conditions are at the time and opportunities are at the time. So maybe that's not doable. Maybe the upshot of this will be that you'll tell me, no, we have to set something up, and then 2 or 3 years later we'll have to revisit and update it. And I would be fine with that if that's the upshot.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Woods.
Yeah, a couple of questions, here for me. When we look at the market rate affordability of 80 to 120%, is there a reason, Dan, that we didn't include 60 to 80%?
Yeah, so the idea that 60 to 80% really isn't going to be delivered by market rate housing. That would need to be some sort of subsidized type project, which in terms of types, I mean, it'd still be allowed, but that's going to be kind of separate from this. A likely language would exempt like subsidize affordable housing from any of the variety requirements. So if funding comes into place, partnerships are made, and affordable developer goes in and builds something, then, I mean, that's kind of outside this. So because we can't require a certain amount of, 60 to 80%, and there's not a product necessarily, even like an ADU or cottage that, would be likely to be developed at that price point without being somehow subsidized.
So what about the tiny homes that I keep mentioning? Where would that fall? Or do you even see that falling in here at all?
Yeah, so that would likely, I could look back at the affordable housing analysis, but likely those would be in the 80%, 80 to 120% category as well. It meet a different kind of market need, demographic than maybe some of the other product, but also it'd still be fairly expensive because, I mean, the fixed cost of building the infrastructure as well as the fixed cost of installing kitchen fixtures and bathroom fixtures before you get into, quote, the cheap space such as bedrooms and such. So just...
Have you actually looked at the cost of the high-end tiny homes? The ones that sit on a slab? Those are pretty affordable, and I would encourage you to look at those. The other piece here, and I'm assuming with this second bullet, ADUs and cottages, you're talking about cottage clusters here, is that correct?
Yeah, and we can double check, that's my understanding, but I know we have some memos, but we can double check to see if any of the tiny homes or cottages could meet that below 80% market segment. And in that case, it may be something we would want to include in the target housing types.
Yeah, I think you should really look at that. I've looked at that, and if you want some more information after what I've sent you, then that's fine. But, we're looking at affordability here, first-time homeowners, and I think that's something that we really should seriously consider, making sure, of course, that it fits in with the models that would be in the particular sub-areas. So I just want to make sure we look at that. And the accessible living options, I think we need to also consider a certain percentage of homes that are one level that can meet the needs of seniors, of those that want to move from a two-story level home to a one level. So I think we should look at those kinds of options or option for those who may want that. And then, when we look at how much should be required versus incentivized, I really lean more toward the incentive of incentivizing, although I do realize that we do need to require a certain percentage. I'm struggling with what that percentage should be with all of the other variables that we're looking at right now. So I'm not sure what additional information I would need to come to a decision on that, but I can't say right now that I can give you a percentage. Maybe when I look at Mr. Carr's information, that might help, but right now I can't say.
Okay, understood. I didn't expect that everyone would have percentages like Andrew, so, or Commissioner Carr.
Okay, real quick, Ms. Gallagher, I saw your hand up previously.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I think Aaron's touched on a bit of it, but it just strikes me that it's almost like the old saying, if we build it, they'll come. And I just want to make sure that we're really paying attention to the extreme changes that are happening in our country, in our climate, in our world, of serving the needs of the future population rather than the known quantity right now. And that's really my concern here. Is we're making decisions about, percentages of how much we do this and how much we do that, but it's based on what we know right now. And the question is, what kind of a community are we going to be 20 years from now? What kind of a population are we trying to attract to Wilsonville? What kind of businesses are we trying to attract? Will we be able to provide housing to the population that will work in those businesses? And I think that's why I was hesitant before, because I'm just not clear on it. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Commissioner Mesbach.
The point that Commissioner Gallagher just made is exactly why I was talking about the need for flexibility. But it also occurred to me, listening to Commissioner Woods, that we are focused in this neighborhood as we should be, and I don't want to be muddying that water. But we we've already talked about the fact that in a greenfield development, you're not going to have affordability as effectively as you wish you could. On page 20 of attachment 1, the graphs that we had looked at some previous meetings always kind of catches me where the housing shortfall is in the city, and then where the closest target that we can meet, 2 graphs down from it on the same chart. This is a drastic kind of shortfall if you look at it. But when we do that, we need to also consider that the graph for the shortfall of the housing is for the whole city, and the graph where the target that we could potentially meet is for this neighborhood, which is on the edge of the city. Part of what I think would help is if this conversation about affordability had some more leg to it. I don't know whether, I mean, we've talked about how if there were public funding available for housing and so forth, things would be different, at least in other parts of the city, so that you could have housing availability for lower percentages of median income. Has the council done any talking in that area? Are they considering anything like that, or are we still where we were like 3 years ago, before even the housing strategy that we worked on? Are we getting any closer to the city at least looking down the road at the potential of having to have housing services and so forth? Dan?
Yes, it is in process. There's certainly much more work to do, but some quick things. I mean, they're looking at this the transit, the TOD transit project to provide some immediate affordable housing. They've recently worked on the vertical housing tax credit that can be used both in town center, in Villebois, and potentially even if the developer ends up wanting to do vertical mixed use in this commercial area, could potentially be used. Also, the Urban Renewal Task Force, they recently had a meeting about exploring, and they expressed interest in exploring about how urban renewal can come into play as well. Kind of like our potentially a system similar to our WIN program, Wilsonville Investment Now, where it's a spot-specific addition to the urban renewal district in order to take advantage of help from tax increment financing to assist with affordable housing. So that is all being actively looked at right now, but also a lot more to do. I think council realizes that, this is an ongoing conversation, and are very interested in this topic as well.
Well, that's very helpful, because I think the timeline for any of those discussions and conversations to start creating options for affordable housing are probably about the same as this neighborhood developing. So they're all coming about at about the same time. And that's helpful. And at least to me, because I don't have to feel like this is the last best chance for us to get everything we need in affordability taken care of for the city of Wilsonville. Because it's not going to be doable, as the analysis is showing. But even within that context, I want to make sure that we keep the flexibility and not lose opportunities just because we are either too rigid and not creative enough, or too loosey-goosey that doesn't really require and keep the accountability for getting as much affordability as possible.
And I'd want to open it up if she's interested, Director Bateshell, if she has any other comments right now on the housing, on the city's housing efforts. If not, that's okay.
No, I don't have anything to add. You guys covered that pretty well. Thank you, Dan.
Okay.
All right, Commissioner Carr, looks like you got a follow-up.
Yes, thank you. So kind of in listening to Commissioner Gallagher and Mesbah and Woods interact around affordable housing, you know, we're in a conundrum with a greenfield here in Frog Pond, in that if you look at the stats on page 14, our biggest need right now is the really expensive stuff and the really, really, really inexpensive. And that's not at all what we're aiming for with Frog Pond. I think the only way we're going to get to the lower end is what I call infill subsidized, right? You take an existing market rate and you subsidize based on a person, not based on an entire building that's subsidized, right? It's not like a HUD building where everyone is subsidized, but come up with some plan to take market rate housing and subsidize individuals within that housing. But shooting for the 80-120, I think is, you know, we're missing the mark, kind of. Because the largest demand is greater than, you know, what is it, 150 or more. So that's basically the top end of our income scale is where our city is showing the largest demand needed. And then on the total bottom end of this is also where that demand is. So where we're shooting this 80-120, I'm not sure if Frog Pond's going to be able to, you know, it's an idea of build it and they will come. I believe that if this is built, there will be people that buy these houses and these housing units. My question is, how long will they stay in that 80-120? I think they will inflate quickly.
So I'd add just a bit of clarification there. So those tables, and this is, hopefully I can explain it clearly. So they're an extrapolation of existing population. So it doesn't really, so for example, if that 80 down to 20% is missing from our current population, it's not going to forecast out to have a need to serve a growing of existing. But so in some way it shows that needs, but it also reflects a gap for the 120% because that's not a strong part of our existing product mix and population.
So Mr. Pauly, wouldn't that show up in Exhibit 15 in terms of identifying what that city housing need gap is? Because in that chart, the center portion of the chart, shows the existing housing need, and it's high income, and it is very low income and extremely low income, and those are the only three things that this report is saying that we need.
And that matches Exhibit 9 on page 14.
Yeah.
And so Dan, maybe what I'm hearing is that if it was broken up differently, if it was middle income from 80 to 100 and then 100 to 120, then that product mix might show up from 100 to 120. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, so I'm trying to find that language. I may need to come back to this after I find the exact language. And even follow up in our next work session.
Okay. Yeah, that's okay. And Okay. So
And that was also why I was kind of looking at what Villebois, the breakdown in Villebois, because I think it's a very well designed community, and I think it's got a broad mix of housing types, and it's very appealing. It's just a question of who are we building the housing for?
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Are we building it for people in the 80 to 120 that haven't yet moved to our area, or are we trying to build to the people that are already here that want 120 and above? And that's where you're looking at Exhibit 9, and it says we have this huge shortfall at above 120. It's actually probably above 150.
Yeah.
And if we don't have housing for those people, I guess they'll buy a less affordable house. I mean, that's a possibility. Or they may move out. Right? They may move where there's houses that fit their lifestyle. So that's kind of I think Villebois is a very, very well designed, built, and looking community. And if that's what we're shooting for, and those housing types fit in an 80 to 120, then that's our goal. But now we have this huge shortfall in the less than 30% that we have to figure out. And maybe not within Frog Pond, but figure out a way to make housing available for that portion of our population.
Okay.
Yeah, and my comments are going to maybe ramble a tad, so my apologies for that in advance. Exhibit 15 specifically, one question I had, Dan, around the city distribution. Does that city distribution include Frog Pond West, both what has been built and what is planned to be built, or does the city distribution not include that?
Let me get to that. That's Exhibit 15. Yeah, we didn't bring Eco Northwest tonight, not anticipating this detailed on this data, so we can have them here next time, maybe to dig into this a bit more. Exhibit 15.
It's just looking at the housing being built in Frog Pond West. It's all in that 120 and above.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's right. And so that's in general. My question is if the city distribution in Exhibit 15 on page 20 of the attachment or 49 of the PDF is inclusive of Frog Pond West, that's one thing. But if it doesn't include it, then that says that we've built some of that 120 and above.
True.
That doesn't need to be included. It changes the existing housing need, which would then change the potential requirements for what we need to build in Frog Pond East and South.
Right.
And so for me, that's a big thing to know, so that we make sure that we're using all of the data that we have at our disposal, because the proposed target right now that we're showing is lots of high income, lots of middle income, and very little of the other things that we need. And while I acknowledge that it is not possible for us to solve the existing need gap for extremely low income in Frog Pond East and South all on its own, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to do something meaningful to make progress. And so if we don't have anything, or if we have very, very little, then it just means that existing city gap is going to get larger and not smaller. And so for me, Dan, that all comes back to I struggle with defining targets for housing types without being able to see that picture clearer.
Okay.
And for me, it didn't click in until you had said something earlier where you had said that this target housing type doesn't include low income, very low, or extremely low, because that would require subsidies and some other support from the city. I guess my question is if that's what we care about, why wouldn't we put targets for those housing types as well, even if that means that land doesn't get built on? Because if, as a city, if we really care about solving those problems, then maybe we have to wait for the monetary policies to be in place to support that type of development. We don't have to build in Frog Pond East and South right now. We're choosing to.
So, again, I'll say this, that at this point, that, I mean, the types that would be the below 80%, a lot of them would be similar to this 80 to 120%, but they just would be subsidized. So we're talking about products rather than actual price point with these regulations. So the term is used inclusionary zoning, and there's pretty specific limitations in state law about what we can do with inclusionary zoning in terms of requiring a certain income need be met. So that's a limitation we're working around in terms of the zoning approach. Not really working around, is we're not addressing that directly here in terms of, but we're saying what is the product mix that's most likely to provide, to be able at market rate to meet identified needs. And hopefully some of those have projects that come in that do have funding from different sources to make them more affordable. But we can't require and guarantee that through the tool of zoning. There needs to be other tools beyond zoning in order to accomplish that.
I don't disagree with that. I guess it's still that, I guess in my mind, the concept of making sure that we have that right product mix to help facilitate the lower price points, even though we can't force a price point on its own. So that opportunity for smaller condos, smaller townhouses, smaller detached houses.
Okay. No, I hear that. That makes sense. So really, I'm hearing from a number of you to really look more into if the ADUs, cottages, other living options that may be able to meet that even below 80% at market rate, and how that may be facilitated.
And I think that, maybe updating exhibits 2 through 4 to break out the cottages and the ADUs. Right now, they don't include those at all. The lowest it goes is to a 2-bedroom condo. And so maybe adding those 2 product types in there would give us and the rest of the city a better feel for what those price points could be, and if that's something then that we can put as a target for a specific housing type.
Okay. And I am sensitive time. I mean, we need to have this conversation, but I want to leave enough time for the other items as well. So just
okay. Well, let's move on then.
I wanted to, before we move on, mention a couple of things here. 2 or 3 statements are all true at the same time. The target housing type is going to be targeted towards a certain area median income. That's fine. It's not a zoning issue, the affordability. It's not all a zoning issue. That's correct as well. But I'm also hearing, as we get a clearer and clearer picture here, a willingness or an encouragement, I don't know what to call it, on the part of some, at least on the commission, maybe the whole commission, to encourage the city to move faster in providing incentive tools to make affordable units available in this neighborhood, even if it's not through zoning. It could be that they come up with a policy or a scheme that allows the city to buy certain units, and those units become available And what Commissioner Carr mentioned is also going to be important, is that we need to make sure, or the city needs to make sure, that those units then, once they turn hands in a few years, don't become all of a sudden expensive units, because now you can sell them for much higher. They need to remain affordable to the next buyer or the next person living there to be able to use it, as opposed to gentrifying. So all of those things, I think, are coming up in all of our concerns. And I'm bringing this up because as Dan comes up with a clearer picture, I want to make sure he also keeps in mind that with that clearer picture, it's possible that some of us are going to say, well, maybe it's time for the city to make the movement faster towards at least the beginning of having certain units that the city buys and owns that are available for as affordable units, perpetually even.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mesbah. I'm gonna say let's move on, Mr. Cawley, so that we can.
Before you move on, hold on. Before you move on, I've had my hand up for some time.
Me too.
I do have something to say, Commissioner Huberline.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Woods. I did not see your hand up.
Yes, it's been up for a while. So let me say this. First of all, what is it that we're trying to accomplish here?
Yes.
We need to make sure that we don't move off of that there. What I was trying to say earlier, and it has come up, when I asked about the 60 to 80% there, we need to keep in line what we're trying to achieve here in this objective with affordable housing. I want to make sure that we don't get past that, and we kind of got to this roundabout. But I just want to make sure that we keep all that in mind. That's what I wanted to say.
And I also had my hand up, and I'd like to say one small thing, please.
Go for it.
Okay.
We're here.
Let me jump in on what Aaron just said. What I haven't heard in the discussion, and I'm wondering why not, is it seems to me there should be some kind of visionary partnership between the kind of people we're trying to create housing for and the kind of community we're hoping to create as we grow in Wilsonville. What kind of industry, what kind of businesses are we trying to attract? Because it seems to me there should be some kind of partnership on that thought. The kind of businesses we want to bring in are going to require employees and management that want to live here. And I'm not hearing that. And it seems to me that if we had a clear idea of the community that we're building for in the future, it would help us anticipate the kind of people who want to come and live here and buy here so they don't have to commute and they can work in their own community. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. So, Chair Heberlein, I'll go through, I think this portion will be pretty brief, but really the cap on housing variety, I just want to clarify and get some guidance from the commission on, because really stepping back to the design concepts of having variety throughout, but we're also trying to get affordability. So take this scenario where you have an area that's predominantly townhouses, and you start requiring, okay, we don't want too many townhouses, we need some variety in there. And when you require that variety, you're going to reduce the number of relatively more affordable townhouses and likely introduce more detached homes. So the question then, is it really, is this component too about limiting too many expensive homes, too many detached single-family homes, or is it about making sure generally, whether even if it is a more affordable option, that there's variety throughout, even if it's at the cost of maybe fewer, less expensive units? Is that question clear? I know this is kind of a concept.
Commissioner Carr, go for it. You got your hand up.
I think that has to do with the mins and the maxes that we're talking about. If we develop that we'll prevent a predominance of any one type. The struggle is to make it affordable. Townhouses and cottages seem to be the best answer for making them affordable, which means there will be less single-family dwellings. Not saying whether that's good or bad. It's just saying that I think we can control that through the mins and maxes by type.
Yeah, so we're talking generally a max of any one type in a given area is this component 2 that we're talking about. And if we wanted to focus that cap just on single unit dwellings or apply generally, including to market rate housing that may be more affordable.
No, I think we want to include mins and maxes across, and because you'll end up with something similar to Villavois, where you have, I think they even have 5-unit townhouse buildings. They've got 2-unit, 3-unit, 4-unit, and 5-unit townhouse buildings that all have a different look and feel to them. So it doesn't seem like there's a overwhelming number of townhouses, because it's not like these townhouse buildings are all similar in structure and color and shape, and there's enough variety of physical appearance. There's enough variety among the different townhouse types that I think you wouldn't be able to walk a neighborhood and say, wow, there's a lot of townhouses here. When you walk through Villavois, you don't get that impression, although there does seem to be, at least in the village center, there seems to be a large number of housing units and townhouses. And then as you kind of get out on the edges, it looks more and more single family.
I believe that we need to really look at a balance here. Commissioner Carr, I agree with you on these mins and maxes, but we got to balance this so we don't get into a look like was just said with townhouses of different varieties that are predominant in a particular area. So for me, I think we really need to look at a balance of the variety that we want, so that it does look like a really homogeneous community across the board. So that's what I'd like to see us strike for.
Okay.
Commissioner Tizitsky.
I agree with what's been said so far. I mean, once we kind of get those mins, I think that the max will balance out a little more. But I think I need to see a little more information on it first. Yeah, that's all I got for now.
Gallagher.
So I'm done.
Let's not forget that we are basing some of the design of the neighborhood on the transit concept, which is the neighborhood center and so forth is going to have higher density. So similar to Villavois Village Center, you're going to have more density in the village center. And that is not an imbalance. That is the concept that you're going to have that kind of density near where the activity center is. However, it's true that we've talked about a balance overall in the neighborhood. And let's not forget that we also talked about the flip side of that, which is typically the affordable units are put in the most undesirable part of the neighborhood, out of the way, out of sight. And we early on discussed that we don't want that. We talked about Rod Shetty's research on how neighborhoods help lower income kids kind of have a different outlook as they are cohorts with higher income kids in the neighborhood and so forth. So that's the other aspect of balancing this out and not having one type predominantly in one area, is that we want to mix the affordability element and the type as well. So I wanted all of us to kind of remember that those were conversations we had over the past several months and had agreements over them.
Commissioner Mespa, I think as long as, I'm trying to say, I think requiring variety generally is important to make sure that we have that cohesive neighborhood. And I think with defining what those percentages should be throughout the neighborhood, we can help to ensure that we get what we are looking for, in terms of the general look and feel. So it can't be down to a specific district. You can only have X amount, but the central area is going to be denser, and then it's going to spread out from there. And as long as we have those percentages set up appropriately, I think we'll be okay.
Thank you. So I think that's it on that. I know that was quite the hour. Miranda, would you like to, good to see you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just had something quick to add, and I just wanted to start by saying thank you, commissioners, for a great conversation. I don't envy the position that you're all in. A lot was discussed about Villebois tonight, and so I just wanted to point out a couple things of why we're in some ways a harder position now. With Villebois, we could geographically determine essentially what housing types were going to go where with precision. And we did create that transect of density, and we could say that specific parcels were going to be townhomes, period. And during the development of Villebois, there were times at which the development community came to the city and said, this is too challenging at this time. Can we please build single family? And we said no. And we waited, and it took time, and we got the townhomes eventually built on those parcels. The townhomes inevitably offered a different price point than our single-family detached. We're in a position now, a good position in some ways, with House Bill 2001, which requires additional variety, but it doesn't allow us to provide the same type of precision or known development pattern in a specific area. So where before we could require maybe this area we want cottage housing, the topography works there, in this area we want townhomes, in this area we specifically want this other type of product. We don't have that same type of precision or flexibility in some ways. We're now in a position of we allow many more housing types to be built on any given parcel, and that makes it harder to know whether the developer will choose a single family home, a townhouse, or a cottage cluster, whether or not they'll choose to do an ADU or not, which is the reason, obviously, as all of you know, the reason why we're talking about these percentages and minimums and maximums. But it does make it really important for us to, whether we're land on something precise or maybe whether we land on something that provides more flexibility and is more of a range, I think is important to us figuring out how we do still confirm that we have the same type of variety while we don't have the same tool. I don't know if I added anything to the conversation except to acknowledge that this is a very difficult difficult exercise for everybody at hand, and we appreciate the good dialogue and questions. And if there are things you think about that would help you to better answer these questions and get us to an answer, we'd appreciate knowing that as well.
I appreciate that, Miranda. That is helpful. I think, and I wouldn't take our very pointed questions and comments to be reflective of our displeasure on anything, just wanting to make sure that we get this right. And I'll throw out there, if we could solve this problem if the city was able to come up with a creative way to buy the land. And then we could do what Villablanc did. Just going to throw it out there. But, unlikely. But if we could, then we do have that flexibility. We just haven't found a way to make it happen.
Thank you. And I second what Ms. Bateshell said. Is I really do appreciate this conversation we've had over the last hour. It's been really helpful, good feedback, a lot of hard mental work has occurred in the last hour. I want to acknowledge that. So I don't know if the commissioners may want to break before we shift gears, or if you want to plow forward into the next topic.
I'm ready to plow forward. I'm looking for somebody else to say no. Not seeing any movement that direction, so I say let's go for it.
Okay, so I will go ahead then and again introduce Samya Kinney as well as Joe Dills, who I'll let take over this discussion of public realm.
Dan, Joe, do you want me to launch in?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Hi, everyone. Hi, commissioners. Thanks for having me here tonight. It's good to see you all. I want to be very brief because it sounds like we're short on time, but this is an important aspect, I think, of the Frog Pond East and South Master Plan, which is defining and guiding the design of the public realm separate from private development. And when we say public realm, we're referring to any of the publicly accessible and even publicly visible aspects of the planning area. So streets, parks, public spaces of any kind, alleys, natural resources. And as we're developing guidance within that master plan for the design of the public realm, we're starting to develop some key guiding principles that we think helped us to guide us as we're thinking about how to illustrate intent for the design of the public realm. So this is that draft list. I apologize, one of them is duplicated, but providing places for gathering and civic life for a diverse community, celebrating and enhancing neighborhood character through existing site elements that we can celebrate and bring into the public realm, like the Grange, integrating parks and green spaces, preserving and restoring natural resources, and providing really good options for safe, low-stress transportation that can get folks out of their cars and be able to meet their daily needs without an automobile. So those are some guiding principles that will inform the overall development of the public realm guidance within the master plan. Move to the next slide, please. I'm going to cover the draft public realm materials that were included in your packet today. And I want to reiterate that these are going to be refined based on your feedback and also expanded upon as part of an overall deliverable that guides the design of the public realm for Frog Pond East and South. So today I'll cover the significant tree inventory map, the street demonstration plans, which includes 2 options, as well as some thinking about bicycle and pedestrian circulation within those 2 options. A cross-section concept for Advance Road as an example of multiple cross-section studies that we'll be doing for the study area, as well as a park and open space framework. So let's start with trees. We had an arborist, Morgan Folan, who did an inventory of potentially significant trees in the study area between January and April of this year. So based on general size and condition and species of tree, she has identified high priority, potentially significant trees, which are highlighted in the brightest green on this map, secondary priority significant trees, which are a slightly duller green, and then a series of groves of trees in varying condition, many of them in kind of low value category. And if you move to the next slide, This is a map, an aerial map that kind of shows you where those significant trees sit within the study area. Some of them are clustered within the northern part of East neighborhood and then scattered throughout the South neighborhood. And really this map will provide the basis for guiding the regulatory aspects of preserving potentially significant trees within this area and working from Wilsonville's existing natural resource policy and tree code. Move to the next slide. You know, there are existing precedents close by within the city of Wilsonville for preserving significant mature trees within both private and public development. The two images on the left are both from both from Wilsonville. The top left is from Frog Pond West, and the bottom one is from Wilsonville High School. But there's opportunities within public infrastructure as well as private lots to kind of bend streets or expand rights of way or design and site development thoughtfully to preserve those existing tree roots. And the larger image is an example from Hillsborough, an apartment development that was able to preserve a mature tree within the kind of community gathering space. So the public realm guidance deliverable that we're going to produce will provide some strategies and potential ways of going about preserving those significant trees in the planning area. Move to the next slide. Next element is the street and block demonstration plan. So the intent with these drawings is really to show different ways of meeting the intent of providing a safe and low-stress and accessible network of transportation options. So we've developed these two maps not as regulatory maps to say this is exactly where the streets and blocks should be laid out, but more so to illustrate that intent. So in order to do that, we provided two options. The first option shows a direct connection. Let's see if I can draw here. Can you all see my mouse?
No.
Oh, no, okay.
You see?
Yeah, I can see it now.
Okay, so direct connection from Frog Pond Lane down to 60th. The other distinguishing feature of this street and block plan is the slight offset from the BPA easement of that connection, which we've spoken about in past discussions. We're also showing in this option the neighborhood park about a block away from the main street, but directly down from the main street, and the primary connection being from Brisbane Main Street down to 60th as the collector. Lastly, this option is distinguished by showing sides and fronts of homes facing on Stafford Road, which is a little bit different from the existing condition along Beckman. So that's another area we'll be continuing to study. As well as this option shows 3 locations for pedestrian crossings to the community park across Advance Road. And part of what's going on currently is a study of where and what kind of intersections and crossings will be the safest and most appropriate for Advance Road. But in the service of providing options, this one shows 3 connections. If we move to the next slide. We also studied an option that follows parcel lines a little bit more closely and pushes the neighborhood park up to be sort of contiguous with the BPA easement. So it's a slightly different configuration between the park and the main street, but it still creates this nice direct connection. The primary distinguisher here is that there is not a direct cut through from Frog Pond Lane down to 60th. Instead, the Brisbane Main Street becomes that main connector through the study area, which will kind of create lower speeds and lower stress networks in other areas of the east. This option is also showing the backs of homes facing onto Stafford Road, and that's a similar condition to what's seen along Beckman Road today. Again, that's something we want to study and get everyone's feedback on. And then here we're showing 2 pedestrian crossings of Advance Road.
Soumya, can I add a thought to this one?
Yeah.
Hello, commissioners. The revised street system here also has some land use changes that go along with it. So the type 1 darker brown is now up in the vicinity, goes all the way north to the BPA easement, as does the neighborhood park provide that connection. That's intentional here, at least on the type 1. Perhaps there can be some parking utilization of the BPA easement. It's a little more flexible kind of approach to that edge of the neighborhood that's basically beveled along this power line easement. This one also provides a little more, I would say, centrality to Brisbane here. It's a main street in both concepts, but the connection from 60th up to the park and then east-west to Brisbane, and Brisbane keeps going all the way west to the Beckman Creek Trail and corridor. Really, Brisbane has come up in importance in both neighborhoods, Frog Pond West and East, through the emerging street system here. Last point about this one is that the option for a third pedestrian crossing on Advance Road, mid-block between 60th and 63rd to access the community park, that could be part of this option as well. That's pretty much interchangeable with however we finalize the streets.
And I would add that a lot of the driver of moving the neighborhood park, as well as the type 1 up adjacent to the BPA easement, were comments from City Council of being able to better utilize the BPA easement, either as an extension of the neighborhood park. Maybe if you had a shelter at the edge, you might be able to have a dog run. We're still verifying, have messages into BPA to just verify what can be used there. We're exploring that. And having type 1 being able to utilize potentially a portion of the BPA easement for parking. So those were ideas that came out at the council level that kind of drove to providing this option too.
Thank you. Sorry, Sonia, keep going.
No, please feel free to jump in if I'm missing anything. Maybe the next slide will be helpful. And Joe and Dan, let me know if you'd like me to stop and we can have discussion, or should we just go through to the end?
Yeah, it might be good, maybe just briefly get any initial feedback on option 1 versus option 2 in terms of that street network, if that's all right.
I'm okay with it, if you're okay with it.
Yeah, let's just go through
All right.
some quick thoughts on that.
Okay, let's do it. Can I go to Commissioner Tazinski? Why don't we start with you this time?
Sure. I personally like option 2 a little bit better. As much as I like the idea of option 1 having the main street flow kind of into that park, I actually like moving the park to kind of flow into the easement. I think that to me makes a little more sense. And I prefer to not have the houses face the busy Stafford Road. Just in my mind, a kid's going to run out the door into the street as opposed to running out into the backyard. So, and I would prefer to have if my home is facing Stafford Road, I might look somewhere else in the neighborhood to buy instead. So those are my initial thoughts. But yeah, so option 2 for me.
Commissioner Wood.
Yeah, I also like option 2 for the reasons that Commissioner Kaczynski said. I think also, moving that neighborhood park to right there to the easement, I think we'll get a lot more bang for the buck, if you will, having it there, and that location, to me, really fits well within that easement part. The other piece, or the other areas here, I see no issue with at all. But that's the only comment I have is I like option 2, and mainly because of how we've got the neighborhood park re-swizzled, if you would, and also with the way that the type 1 is also butting up against the BPA easement.
Commissioner Mesbach.
The option 2 is my preferred option. Connecting the park to the easement brings the easement into the neighborhood. That's a gateway into the easement, instead of turning your back onto the easement, which option 1 does. And I wasn't sure with option 1 how owned the easement would be as part of the neighborhood. I think option 2, especially with type 1 housing looking over the easement for a good portion of it, is going to make the easement a more defensible owned space as part of the neighborhood. Looking at it, I wish one of these streets was more of a boulevard kind of a design to connect the community park with that neighborhood park and the easement, instead of just having a trail, which I guess I'm envisioning as lines on a paved street. Even if it means making a particularly well-designed wide green sidewalk on one side of the street connecting the neighborhood park to the future community park through the downtown area or through that higher density residential area, that would create even a better organic connection of the natural areas at the core of the neighborhood. I like the fact that we have more type 1 housing in and around open space and downtown area, or middle neighborhood area, I should say, with option 2.
Great. Commissioner Gallagher.
Yeah, I also like option 2 better for all the reasons stated, and I agree with what was just said about an open boulevard. It just seems to me if we're going to plan another park, that I'd like to see some kind of connection between the two. So, option 2.
Commissioner Carr?
As much as I like to play the contrarian, I can't. Option 2 is definitely my preference. Living near the BPA easement, I like the idea of the park being next to it and encroaching upon it. I think that's a good use of additional real estate for the BPA easement. So, yep, it's number 2 for me as well.
Well, we might as well make it unanimous. I as well prefer option 2, both from the type 1 intersection with the easement and the idea of having that connection to the easement as well as the neighborhood park. One random thought that came to me during this discussion was, given where the neighborhood park is in relationship to the BPA easement, maybe the neighborhood park doesn't need to be as large because you have that BPA easement space that can be utilized. And if we're trying to maximize buildable space to reduce overall development costs, then maybe that's something that we can look at. Or you steal a little bit of that from the neighborhood park and maybe make a linear park from the Grange through the high value trees down to the village, the commercial main street, so that you have a connection between those two. That was another thought. If you take some of that neighborhood park area off while still maintaining the connection to the BPA easement, but being able to make a connection from the Grange down to the commercial main street, and maybe make that treed area a little more functional.
Great feedback. That was really helpful. It's a great idea. So thank you. So Samia.
So since we've decided on option 2, I'll briefly describe option 1, how we've envisioned some bicycle and pedestrian circulation. The intent with the bicycle and pedestrian circulation concepts in your packet are really just to be thoughtful about, when we're laying out streets and blocks, where are we planning for the primary routes for bikes and peds and accessibility to be, and how do those connect to a system of multi-use trails? So in option 1, that does create a more direct bike lane connection between Frog Pond Lane and 60th. And then you'll see the dashed orange is indicating where we're suggesting shared street markings. And I think all of the local streets in the study area should be considered kind of low-speed shared street environments. So not that any of them would not be safe and comfortable for riding bikes on, but that by marking those streets, you're creating a system of neighborhood greenways that's offset from the bigger, potentially busier streets and provides that nice loop through the different neighborhoods and accessibility to parks and green spaces, particularly to the BPA easement and the community park and neighborhood park. That's one option. Oh, before I move on, I should say the main street we're seeing as a potential for also a shared street environment rather than a bike lane environment, just in the interest of keeping the overall width of the street narrower. And since there would be on-street parking envisioned along that street, potentially that might be a better environment for a shared environment than a bike lane. So moving to the next option, this does create a less direct bike lane connection from 60th up to Frog Pond Lane, which is, and for bike lanes. However, it sort of connects users to the park and trail system through the neighborhood park, as you all pointed out, through the BPA easement and trails, and also provides the opportunity to just exit out onto a shared street network that will still connect you throughout those neighborhoods. If you needed to get between Frog Pond West and Frog Pond East and South, there's plenty of options. And then on these maps also, we're noting the thin green lines or trail connections, multi-use paths that could connect off-street, for example, between the school and across Meridian Creek down to Beckman Creek Primary. So let's do one more. This is a cross-section concept for Advance Road. And this is not the only concept nor the final concept that we'll be studying in this way. So we welcome your feedback on this idea, and also would love your thoughts on which streets we should study in this manner throughout the study area. For this concept, we're looking at Advance Road where it passes by the community park. The idea is to take a collector cross-section and right-of-way and provide generous sidewalks of 12 feet, incorporate some existing power poles in the planter strip on the north side, planted median and bike lanes, and then have houses fronting onto the community park. So front doors facing the park across the street to really create that sense of integration of the park and eyes on the park as that area develops. That's kind of the materials to do with streets as public space and public realm. And then we have some materials on, do we want to go back and do it?
Yeah, maybe we should. Do you want to check if there's ideas of what streets to study? I'm hearing that definitely kind of that green connection between the community park and neighborhood park along what would be an extension of 60th north of Vance Road is probably a good candidate. Imagine Brisbane as well. But others that the commission is particularly interested in.
All right, let's go with Commissioner Mesbah.
I'm good with the options that have been shown here. Whichever, if 60th works best to have a wider sidewalk like you're proposing with Advance, to wrap around and then have a connector between the community park and the neighborhood park, that's fine with me. And having a connection to the downtown is good too. Although Commissioner Heberlein was talking about that green area between the commercial area or close to the commercial area, and that area, I don't know whether that would fit in any kind of a green space trail or something that otherwise would, that's an opportunity that would otherwise probably get missed. You have a green focal point shown on your park and open space framework there. but not necessarily any connection between that and the commercial area.
Commissioner Woods.
Yeah, I there's not much more I can say on this. I like what's shown here for the wider streets and moving, or I should say, going into Brisbane. So, short of that, I mean, I don't have anything additional. I like what you've shown here.
Commissioner Gallagher?
I hate to do it, but I agree. I love what you've done with the advanced road. I think that would be just. My children grew up across from the park, and I know how wonderful it is. So, it makes you. It really opens the whole feel up of the neighborhood.
Kaczynski?
Looks good to me.
Commissioner Carr?
Again, I hate to agree, but I do. I think that the options presented, provide a lot of trail connections and a lot of bike paths. And yeah, I do agree this advanced road cross section will, in essence, tie east and south together. Even though there's this main artery between them, I think it'll tie those two developments together nicely.
Great. Okay, now on to my questions or comments. Mostly positive, but a couple of maybe harder questions. Okay, so Advance Road is a great area to stop at first. So what happens at the end? So this is a cross section at the proposed community park. What does it look like another 750 feet down where it becomes Advance Road, the rural area, and not Advanced Road, City of Wilsonville? Yes, right there. Are we talking about having that same cross section all the way up to the end, and then it just dead ends to nothing?
So what you're likely to have, what's kind of shown in this concept, is on the north side, it continues to have that wide treatment. Past 60th, those are homes that are not likely to redevelop, so you're likely to have that south side not continue at that point, just have a curb. I think there's opportunity likely to bring potentially the trail up, make a strong connection up through the neighborhood into the BPA easement path at the end, so it kind of doesn't dead end into the dip, the giant dip down there at the up and down road, as it's known at my house, but rather curves up and into the BPA trail.
Okay, and I think that's a great tie-in to some of my next comments is, that tie-in and having a more emphasized tie-in in terms of bicycle circulation in the BPA easement. I ride a decent amount, enough to ride around to Wilsonville a lot. And if I'm going to ride from Advanced through the BPA easement and then down. I'm going to bypass the entire, section of the neighborhood unless I want to go there. And so having that intentional access to the BPA easement and the connections to those major streets at Stafford and Advanced would be a key feature to me. And then obviously having those tie-ins from the BPA easement to the neighborhood park, and then going into the commercial center. That's it.
Okay, thanks.
And the last piece is the park and open space framework map that is also in the memo. The idea here is in the land use map and in the street demonstration plans, we've shown conceptually not only the neighborhood park and the community park, but also a series of small dispersed open spaces throughout the neighborhoods with the intent of showing how each neighborhood should really have its own smaller destination that gives it some character and gives the people living around it some place to go and gather. However, we know that it's sort of unlikely that we can regulate exactly where those little parks and open spaces can occur. So what we're trying to do instead is to indicate general areas and locations within which we think a central neighborhood destination would make a lot of sense, and that's those stars with the dashed circles around them. So this is not saying thou shalt build a small pocket park at this star. It's saying look in this general area for opportunities to incorporate a small pocket of open space that can be a publicly accessible and usable destination. We are calling these green focal points. And if we move to the next slide briefly, we have some examples of what is envisioned for those types of spaces. It can be very diverse. It could be small community garden patch. It could be green courtyard in between housing developments, pocket parks, nature play or play and splash pad areas for keeping cool in the summer, any kind of gathering place that's really usable and accessible to the neighborhood. That's the park and open space fair. Maybe we should go back to the map for comments on this one. I'll be the...
Okay, given the general consensus on the last ones, I'm going to say, does anybody have anything specific that they want to comment about? Commissioner Carr, go for it.
I noted that in east, there's a trail connection pretty much to all of those green focal points, but we don't have any trail connections down below. Is that something that we should consider, especially that lower left quadrant below Meridian Creek? It should connect up with the trail to Beckman Creek school. I don't know if we have trail connections between the other south and the future community park, or that's my input.
Thanks. Anybody else with any thoughts on this? Not seeing any hands going up or anybody interested to say anything. The one thing I guess that I would question in terms of the general placement would be the green focal point at the northeast section on the north side of the BPA easement, the one to the right. That one seems very out of balance in terms of the center of that general neighborhood area, so I was wondering if it made sense that that was more centralized. And you could potentially look at the same thing on the others on that other neighborhood as well. Yeah, it's putting it more in the center instead of so close to the BPA easement. Yeah, that's what I was thinking might make more sense, but I'm open to thoughts on that. Hearing none, I think we're ready to move forward.
All right. So thank you again for another topic. This will be the shortest. I just wanted to share what we're doing in engagement and kind of what the nature is. We're really focusing on the public realm right now in terms of our survey work, while still keeping our ear to the ground around housing variety. We had a great event yesterday, Popsicles in the Park. I'd characterize it, we had those that normally would show up at a public event, former commissioners as well as neighbors. We also hit a lot of people that probably wouldn't have otherwise been involved in the project, and it was great weather, though thunderstorms were threatening early on. The afternoon turned out great. We also have a similar event, the city's block party, which always brings out a good group, is on August 25th, and we're doing an additional focus group for Spanish speakers September 10th. In addition to this, there's a lot of, I want to mention a couple parts of this. We're doing a lot of partnerships, including with the school district. It's not mentioned here, but August 23rd, we're looking at still being solidified, but the school district is planning a open house regarding the design of the Frog Pond School, and we're working with the school district to participate in that alongside our parks and engineering as they're discussing the Frog Pond West Park as well as the Beckman Corridor project. So really talking about all these aligned projects in the Frog Pond area together. Also, there's a back to school event next week that we're working with the school district about potentially tabling at as well. So really appreciate these partnerships, working with internally as well as externally, and reaching a variety of people, and look forward to the input. And you have the survey text in your packet. Encourage you to take the survey, or otherwise providing comments on the topics of the survey. I don't know that at this late hour we'll take time to do that tonight, but I'll leave that to you, Chair. But also, Joe, anything to add about our engagement activities coming up?
Everybody enjoyed the popsicles yesterday. They were a big hit. No, I think we've got a nice set of summertime outreaches going on here, so.
Yeah, it's nice to see. It's nice to have some outreach in person. It was actually the first time I've seen Joe in person since before the Middle Housing Project. So that was nice. Okay, and I think we've covered all of our questions here. So that is all I had, unless there's additional general questions or comments about the project and the direction we're headed from the commission.
Oh, great work. Thank you, everybody, for all the time and effort being put into this. We've gone through a lot. We still have a lot more to go, but appreciate all the hard work, and we're getting closer. So I'm excited to see what comes next.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we can move to our informational portion of the agenda. We've got the City Council action minutes and the PC work program. Mr. Polly, anything of note on those? Didn't look like there were any significant movement in the work program. Everything looks to be as it was last month or close to it.
Yeah, the wastewater treatment plant master plan moved out a bit to address some of the concerns. They're still working on some of the demographic stuff that we discussed last work session. That bumped out a month, but other than that, the work program's looking as planned.
All right. Well, unless there's anything else, I think we're ready for a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion that we adjourn.
I'll second.
All right. We have a motion. We have a second. Given that, this meeting is adjourned at 8:07 p.m. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
See you all later.